You're 19, hooks dug into a wood pole, belt cinched, arm shaking at 35 feet. The instructor is screaming something from the ground that you can't process because your forearms are on fire and your hooks are starting to slip. You make it down without falling. 21 years later, you're worth $4 million and you haven't climbed a pole in over a decade. This is every level of being a lineman in America and what it actually costs to climb. Level 1, the ground hand. You're 19. You applied to the apprenticeship lottery 3 times before you got the call. Some locals pull names out of a literal drum. You start at a wage under $25 an hour and the work is called ground hand for a reason. You stay on the ground. You hump cable off the reel. You carry cross arms. You flag traffic. You watch a journeyman 30 feet over your head, and you do not touch a single energized thing. The pay is real, but it's not the number you signed up for. Entry-level linemen with under 5 years average $52 to $350 a year. The bottom 10% make under $31,685. You do the math on a legal pad in your truck, and it doesn't feel like the recruiting poster. Pole school is where they cut the herd. You climb a 35-foot wood pole on gaffs and a belt, no spikes in concrete, just steel hooks biting into grain. Your calves cramp on the first attempt. You slide 4 feet and catch yourself with the belt, and the instructor doesn't even look up from his clipboard. Half your class is gone by week 3. The ones who stay learn pole top rescue first. Because if you can't get a man down who's just been shocked 30 feet in the air, you don't get to climb at all. You practice it on a dummy in the rain until your hands remember it without your brain. You sign the apprenticeship agreement. 4 years, 7,000 hours, divided into 1,000-hour periods, each one bumping your percentage of journeyman scale. First period, 60%. You do the arithmetic against the journeyman rate posted on the Union Hall wall, and you realize you're climbing a ladder that's measured in years, not promotions. Level 2, the apprentice. You're 22. Second period now, climbing towards 70%. You've moved off the ground and onto the pole, under direct supervision, hands now close enough to feel the hum off an energized conductor through your gloves. Rubber gloves rated to the voltage class, tested every 6 months. A date stamped inside that you check before every climb because a glove that fails doesn't give you a second chance. You learn the hierarchy of distance. Minimum approach distance isn't a suggestion, it's the line between going home and not. A foreman named Wade teaches you to read a span before you touch it. Sag, tension, what the wind's doing to the wire 2 poles down. He's been doing this 19 years, and he still calls every line dead until he's personally proven it isn't. You ask him why. He says he's been to 4 funerals for guys who skipped that step. You stop asking why after that. The work is brutal in ways nobody told you about. Hot Wisconsin summers in long sleeves and leather because the rubber doesn't breathe, and you can't risk a flash burn on bare skin. Minnesota winters where you climb with frost on the gaffs and your hands go numb inside 2 layers of gloves. You bid your first storm. A line of thunderstorms knocks out power across 3 counties and you're on a truck by 4 in the morning, restoring service on poles that are still wet, still ticking with downed wire half hidden in the grass. You make double your normal rate plus per diem. You also watch a journeyman 2 trucks over get knocked off a pole by a limb nobody saw falling. He lives. He doesn't climb again for 8 months. Level 3, the journeyman. You're 26. You topped out your full journeyman scale. In places like Illinois that's pushing past $60 an hour on the check with a total package, wages plus fringes plus pension contribution, that can run well past 75. You finally feel the gap between what the recruiter promised and what the union actually delivers, close shut. You run a bucket truck now instead of climbing every job. But you still strap on gaffs for anything the bucket can't reach. A pole in a backyard with no truck access. A transmission tower mid-span. Your tool belt carries a hot stick, a voltage detector, grounding cables thick as your wrist, and a pair of rubber sleeves rolled at your shoulders in case the gloves aren't enough coverage. The full kit, properly rated, runs into the thousands. Most of it supplied by the contractor, some of it yours. All of it inspected before every shift because a single pinhole in a rubber glove is the difference between a long career and a closed casket. The fatality numbers follow you whether you want them to or not. Electrical power line installers and repairers carry a fatality rate that sits somewhere between 4 and 5 times the national average across all occupations, year after year, regardless of which study you read. An average of around 26 linemen die on the job every year in this country. For every one of those deaths, line workers say there are roughly 20 more who get carried off a job site alive but never quite the same. Burns, falls, a hand that doesn't close right anymore. You start chasing storm work seriously now. A hurricane makes landfall in the Gulf and the mutual aid call goes out across state lines. You load the truck, kiss your wife, and drive 14 hours toward a blackout instead of away from it. 16 days on a storm contract, 16-hour shifts, double time past 40 hours and time and a half on top of that for the holiday you missed, plus a per diem that doesn't get taxed the same way your base pay does. The check at the end of that run can run higher than what some guys make in 2 normal months. You sleep in a high school gym on a cot between shifts. You don't see your kid's face except through a phone screen for over 2 weeks. The check clears. You stare at it the same way every lineman before you stared at theirs. Grateful and a little sick at what it actually cost. Level 4, the foreman. You're 32. There's no test for this one. A general foreman taps you because you read a print without being told twice because your crew trusts you. Because in 6 years you've never once had a guy get hurt on your watch. The bump in pay is real but modest. A premium on top of journeyman scale, not a doubling. What changes is the weight. You run a 4-man crew now. You're the one who calls a job dead or live. You're the one who checks every glove before a climb, who decides whether the wind crossed the line where work stops, who explains to a superintendent why the job's running an extra day because you won't rush a hot job in the rain. You learn that the title doesn't protect you from the work. You're still climbing, still gloving up, still in the bucket. It just adds a second job on top of the first one, the job of making sure nobody under you becomes one of those 26. A piece of news travels through the hall that year. A crew 2 locals over loses a journeyman on a transmission tower. Contact, not a fall. The kind of accident report that gets read out loud at every safety meeting in the region for the next year. You didn't know him. You still think about him every time you call a line dead before you've personally tested it twice. Level 5, the general foreman. You're 39. You're running multiple crews now, sequencing which circuits go dead and when, coordinating with system operators who control breakers you can't see from where you're standing. Your hands have stopped feeling the hum of energized line because you're rarely close enough to feel it anymore. Your knees, though. Your knees remember every gaff hook you ever dug into a pole. The union halls don't talk about it loudly, but every old-timer mentions the same thing eventually. Hips and knees go early in this trade. The ones that spent 20 years climbing before bucket trucks got common. You're pulling close to 6 figures now, salary plus storm bonuses, plus a pension that's been compounding since you signed the apprenticeship agreement at 19. You sit in planning meetings with engineers who've never climbed a pole, translating their one-line diagrams into a sequence a 4-man crew can execute safely in the dark, in the rain, with a deadline a utility company set without asking how hard the wind was blowing. Level 6, the contractor. You're 47. You left the union hall behind, not bitterly, just outgrown it, and started your own outside line contracting company with 2 trucks and a single municipal contract. You bid against the big national players for storm restoration work, the kind of contract that puts 40 trucks on a highway convoy toward a hurricane the day after it makes landfall. You learn a different math now. Insurance bonds, workers' comp premiums that run brutal in this industry because the fatality numbers don't lie to underwriters, fuel costs for a fleet, payroll for 90 men during a storm mobilization that might only last 3 weeks but has to be staffed like it's permanent. You land your first major mutual aid storm contract. 40 trucks, 90 men, a county with no power for 11 days. The state pays the going restoration rate per crew per day, and after you cover fuel, lodging, insurance, and payroll, the margin left over is the first real owner money you've ever seen. You wire your old foreman a bonus check that's bigger than his old W-2 for the month. You remember being the kid who couldn't do the bucket truck math on a legal pad in his own truck at 19? You're 56 now. You've built the company to a fleet north of 60 trucks across 2 states. A regional utility holding company makes an offer to acquire your contract book and your crews outright. Not the trucks, just the relationships and the trained men. Because trained linemen are the actual scarce asset in this business. Scarcer than equipment, scarcer than capital. You negotiate for 4 months. The deal closes for 8 figures. Your accountant tells you the number twice because you ask her to. You drive to the yard one last time before the paperwork is final. A kid is climbing a practice pole in the training yard, hooks slipping, belt catching him 4 feet down just like yours did 37 years ago. An instructor is yelling something the kid can't process because his forearms are on fire. You watch for a minute. You don't say anything to him. He doesn't know your name. He doesn't know that the man watching him from the parking lot started exactly where he's standing, on a pole that wouldn't hold his hooks, with a check that didn't match the poster. The wire he'll spend his life around carries the same risk it always has. The fatality rate hasn't dropped much in 20 years, no matter how much PPE gets added or how many safety meetings get held. The trade still kills roughly 24 men a year in this country, and it still pays the survivors better than almost anything else you can do without a 4-year degree. You drive out of the yard for the last time. You don't own a bucket truck anymore. You don't own a single pair of rubber gloves. The pole the kid is climbing will outlast both of you, the same way it always does.